Hi guys, and welcome to Gentle History for Deep Sleep. Tonight you find yourself standing at the entrance of a prehistoric cave. The cool stone beneath your fingertips, the smell of smoke and damp earth drifting through the darkness, and the distant calls of animals moving across a world untouched by cities, roads, or electric lights. You step carefully over uneven ground as the last orange glow of evening fades behind you, knowing that this simple shelter will become your entire universe until morning. And just a tiny reality check. Before we settle in, you probably won't survive this lifestyle for very long if your idea of camping is complaining when the hotel pillow is slightly too firm. These early humans were dealing with a much more serious version of sleeping outdoors. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are relaxing, tell me where you're listening from and what your local time is. It is always fascinating to imagine people across the modern world quietly sharing a story about ancient life together. Now, dim the lights. You move deeper into the cave, and the world behind you begins to disappear. There are no glowing screens, no distant traffic, no hum of machines passing through the night. Instead, there is only the sound of your own footsteps, the soft crackle of a small fire, and the breathing of the people gathered around you. This is not a grand underground palace. It is not a comfortable room with smooth walls and a warm mattress waiting at the end of a long day. It is a place chosen because it offers something precious in the ancient world: protection. The cave surrounds you with heavy stone walls that have existed for thousands of years. The surface feels cold and rough beneath your hand. Small drops of water occasionally fall from above, creating quiet echoes that travel through the darkness. Every sound seems larger here because the night outside is enormous. You are living during a time when humans are still learning how to survive in a challenging environment. The landscape around you stretches endlessly with open plains, forests, rivers, and mountains. The weather can change quickly. Animals travel through the same spaces where humans search for food. Every decision matters, including where you choose to sleep. A mainstream historical fact is that many prehistoric humans used caves and rock shelters as temporary or repeated living spaces, especially during periods when these locations offered protection from harsh weather and predators. Archaeological discoveries show evidence of fires, tools, and traces of human activity inside ancient shelters. These places were not always permanent homes, but they were important safe spaces where groups could rest, prepare food, and gather together. Tonight, this cave is your shelter. You notice how everyone has a role. Someone adjusts the fire, carefully adding pieces of wood so the flames continue through the cold hours. Someone arranges animal hides on the ground to create a softer surface. Another person checks the entrance, watching the fading light outside. Nobody is rushing. Nobody is scrolling through endless information. Nobody is wondering whether tomorrow's meeting will start 5 minutes late. Your concerns are much older and much simpler. Will the fire last until morning? Will the weather remain calm? Will the animals passing nearby stay at a safe distance? You sit close to the warmth and listen. The people around you speak quietly. Their voices are not loud because there is no reason to waste energy. The cave carries every sound. A small conversation becomes part of the atmosphere, mixing with the movement of flames and the occasional wind entering from outside. You begin to understand that this place is not only a physical shelter, it is a shared space filled with memories. A person sitting beside you may have rested here many times before. They may know which corner stays driest during rain. They may recognize certain sounds outside. They may remember previous winters and previous journeys. A quirky tidbit from prehistoric research is that some caves contain evidence suggesting ancient humans carefully selected certain areas for repeated activities, including places where fires were built or where objects were left behind. To us, These traces can feel almost like forgotten rooms in an ancient house, even though the people who used them lived in a world very different from ours. You look around and imagine what it feels like to spend an entire night here. The darkness is not empty, it is alive. Outside the entrance, the landscape continues moving. Small creatures search for food. The wind travels across the open land. Larger animals follow paths created by generations of movement, somewhere beyond the firelight. You know that predators are also awake. Among those predators are wolves. You do not yet see them clearly. You only know they exist in this environment. Their distant calls may travel across valleys, sometimes close, sometimes far away. The sound creates a strange mixture of fear and familiarity. These animals are competitors, dangers, and eventually, creatures that will become deeply connected with human history. But tonight, they are simply part of the ancient night. You pull the hide closer around your shoulders and feel the uneven ground beneath you. Modern people often imagine prehistoric life as nothing but constant struggle. But moments like this reveal something more complicated. Even in difficult conditions, humans created comfort where they could. They made warmth from fire. They made beds from natural materials. They created companionship in darkness. Historians still argue whether prehistoric cave use represented long-term settlement patterns or more flexible movements between different locations depending on seasons, resources, and environmental conditions. The answer may have been different for different groups, because human survival has always depended on adapting to local circumstances. The fire becomes smaller now. The voices become softer. You watch shadows move across the stone walls, changing shape with every flicker of flame. The cave paintings and marks left by ancient people, where they exist, remind you that these were not silent creatures simply trying to survive. They were people with curiosity, imagination, fears, hopes, and stories. They looked at the same stars you might see from your own window tonight. They listened to the same wind. They waited for morning. And as you settle into your place among them, with the warmth of the fire in front of you and the ancient wilderness beyond the entrance, you begin to understand the strange comfort of this forgotten night. You're not alone in the darkness. You're surrounded by your community, protected by stone, guided by fire, and listening to a world that existed long before your own. Outside. The wolves continue moving through the night. Inside, you slowly close your eyes. The first thing you notice as you prepare to sleep is that comfort does not appear by accident. In this ancient shelter, every small improvement comes from careful attention. The people around you do not simply drop onto the cold ground and hope for the best. They understand that a night spent resting is also a night spent protecting energy for tomorrow. You watch as the sleeping area slowly takes shape. Someone gathers dry grasses and places them beneath layers of animal hides. The ground is still hard, because no amount of preparation can completely change stone into a soft modern mattress. But the difference is noticeable. The bedding creates a barrier between your body and the cold earth. It helps hold warmth close and makes the long hours of darkness a little easier. You run your hand across the hide beneath you. It feels thick and uneven, carrying the natural marks of the animal that once moved across this landscape. There is no perfect fabric, no carefully designed sleeping bag, no comfortable pillow waiting nearby. Yet this simple material represents knowledge passed from one generation to another. You learn that survival is often built from small discoveries: a better place to sleep, a warmer fire, a safer position near the cave wall, a smarter way to arrange people during the night. These choices may seem ordinary, but in a prehistoric world, ordinary choices could decide whether a group remained strong through difficult seasons. The cave begins to settle into a nighttime rhythm. The fire creates a soft glow, reflecting against the stone surfaces around you. Smoke rises slowly toward openings above, sometimes gathering in thin layers before disappearing. The smell is a mixture of burning wood, animal hides, earth, and the faint scent of food prepared earlier in the evening. It is not exactly the aroma you would expect from a luxury hotel. You probably would not find many travellers leaving 5-star reviews for the ventilation. But for the people here, this place offers something far more valuable than convenience. It offers safety. A mainstream historical fact is that prehistoric humans used fire for multiple purposes, including warmth, cooking, protection, and social gatherings. Archaeological evidence shows that controlled fire use became a central part of human adaptation, allowing people to live in colder environments and spend more time together after sunset. You sit near the flames and notice how important fire is to the sleeping arrangement. The fire is not placed randomly, its location matters. Too close, and the smoke becomes uncomfortable. Too far away, and the warmth disappears. Someone with experience knows exactly where it should be. This knowledge comes from observation. The same person who knows which plants are useful, which paths are safe, and which animals avoid certain areas also understands how to make a better sleeping place. You begin to appreciate how much intelligence exists in these simple actions. The people around you are not living without knowledge. They're carrying a different kind of knowledge, one created through thousands of repeated experiences. They read the landscape like a book. They understand signs that you, with all your modern tools, might completely miss: a change in the wind, a different sound outside, the condition of the firewood, the behavior of animals nearby. Every detail matters. As the night grows deeper, you notice how everyone arranges themselves. The youngest members of the group are close to warmer areas. Those who are responsible for watching the surroundings remain positioned where they can quickly respond if needed. Older and more experienced members may rest while still remaining aware of the environment around them. Sleep is not a complete escape from the world outside, it is a careful agreement with it. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what it would feel like to wake up here after several hours. Your body would remember the hardness of the ground. Your muscles would feel the effects of sleeping in one position, yet you would also experience something rare today. A night completely disconnected from artificial noise. No engines, no notifications, no bright lights interrupting the darkness. Only the breathing of your companions and the distant sounds of the wilderness. A curious detail from prehistoric archaeology is that some ancient sleeping areas show signs of repeated organization, suggesting that people may have had preferred places within shelters for different activities. The idea that prehistoric spaces were carefully arranged can feel surprising, because we often imagine caves as random places of survival. In reality, many groups created order within these environments. You look around and realize that this cave has its own invisible map. The fire area, the sleeping area, the storage spaces, the places where tools are kept, the entrance where the outside world begins. Every part has meaning. The cave is not just a hole in a mountain, it is a temporary home, outside. The wolves continue their movements through the darkness. Their presence changes how you think about sleep. You understand that closing your eyes does not mean the world stops. The forest, the plains, and the valleys continue their endless activity. Yet inside the cave, you feel a strange sense of calm. The people here have done what humans have always done. They have taken an uncertain world and created a small area of comfort within it. They cannot control the weather. They cannot command the animals. They cannot guarantee what tomorrow will bring. But they can prepare. They can cooperate. They can create warmth. The fire becomes a symbol of everything that separates humans from complete helplessness. It represents patience and creativity. It represents countless generations learning how to survive. Historians continue to explore the question of how much prehistoric groups planned their living spaces intentionally, and how much organization developed naturally through repeated habits. Some researchers suggest that even early shelters reveal complex social behavior. while others believe we should be cautious about interpreting every archaeological pattern as deliberate planning. The truth may be somewhere between those ideas. Human life has always been shaped by both instinct and imagination. You pull the hide closer around yourself and listen carefully. The cave has become quieter now. The conversations have almost disappeared. The flames move gently, creating soft patterns on the walls. Your sleeping place is not perfect. The ground is not smooth. The air is not completely warm. The night outside is not completely safe. But for this moment, surrounded by familiar voices, steady firelight, and the protection of stone, you understand why people return to places like this for thousands of years. The cave does not remove every danger. It simply gives you a chance to rest before facing another day. And as the last pieces of wood glow softly, you begin to drift closer to sleep, knowing that beyond the entrance, the ancient world continues breathing under the stars. The darkness outside the cave feels different from the darkness inside. Within the stone walls, you have firelight, familiar voices, and the quiet movements of people who know this place. Beyond the entrance, however, stretches a world that feels endless. The night covers forests, valleys, and open plains where countless creatures continue their search for food and shelter. You lie still for a moment and listen. The first sound you notice is the wind. It moves across the landscape with no concern for the people resting below the stone overhang. It brushes through grasses, moves around rocks, and passes through the entrance of the cave in gentle waves. Sometimes it feels like a whisper. Sometimes it becomes stronger, carrying unfamiliar smells from faraway places. The air tells stories. A change in the wind might suggest approaching weather. A new scent might reveal animals nearby. A colder breeze might remind everyone to add more wood to the fire before the night becomes uncomfortable. In your modern life, you might check a forecast on a phone before leaving home. Here, the people around you become the forecast. Their senses are constantly observing the environment. Someone notices the direction of the wind. Someone listens to the sounds beyond the entrance. Someone watches the movement of shadows. The night is not empty time waiting to pass. It is information. You imagine stepping outside for only a moment. The temperature immediately feels different. Without the protection of the cave walls, the open landscape surrounds you completely. The stars above are brighter than anything you're used to seeing, because there are no city lights competing with them. The sky seems enormous. The silence seems enormous. And then you hear movement. A small sound from the grass. A distant call from another part of the valley. The ancient world is full of activity even when humans are resting. A mainstream historical fact is that prehistoric environments contained a wide variety of large mammals, including animals that no longer exist in many regions today. During the Ice Age, humans shared landscapes with creatures such as woolly mammoths, giant deer, cave bears, and different species of wolves. These animals shaped human decisions about travel, hunting, and shelter. The people inside this cave understand that they are only one part of a much larger ecosystem. They are not rulers of the landscape, they are participants. You notice how differently the night feels when you're not surrounded by artificial boundaries. Today, walls, doors, alarms, and technology create layers of protection in this ancient world. The boundary between human space and wilderness is much thinner. The entrance of the cave is where two worlds meet. Inside is warmth and community, outside is uncertainty and possibility. The fire creates a small island of comfort surrounded by darkness. You watch the flames and think about how remarkable it is that such a simple thing can change the entire feeling of the night. Without fire, the cave would feel much colder and less welcoming. With fire, it becomes a gathering place. People share stories, people prepare tools, people teach children, people rest. The darkness outside remains, but humans have created their own small light within it. A quirky tidbit from prehistoric studies is that some ancient cave sites contain evidence of repeated visits separated by long periods of time, suggesting that certain locations may have held special importance beyond simple shelter. Some caves may have been remembered as meaningful places connected with family history, tradition, or important events. You look at the walls around you and imagine all the generations who may have seen similar shadows moving across the same stone. Different faces, different voices, different nights, yet the same human desire for safety and connection. The wolves outside become part of this atmosphere. You do not imagine them as monsters waiting at the entrance. The reality is more complicated. Wolves are intelligent predators following their own instincts. They are searching for opportunities, protecting their own groups, and navigating the same environment as humans. They hear sounds from the cave. They smell the smoke. They notice the presence of another species. Humans notice them too. This relationship between people and wolves will eventually become one of the most fascinating stories in human history. But on this night, there is no friendship yet. There is no domesticated companion sleeping beside the fire. There is only awareness. Two intelligent species sharing the same landscape. Historians still argue whether early interactions between humans and wolves were mostly competitive, cautious, or already beginning to include cooperation in certain situations. Some researchers believe friendly relationships developed gradually through repeated encounters, while others suggest the process was much more complex and varied between different human groups. You listen again. The wolves are not the only sounds. There are insects moving through vegetation. There are birds settling into hidden places. There are branches shifting under the weight of animals travelling through the darkness. Every sound has meaning. The people around you may not identify every creature, but they recognise patterns. They know which sounds require attention and which can be ignored. This ability comes from living close to nature for generations. You begin to understand that sleep in this world requires trust. Trust in your companions, trust in your shelter, trust in the knowledge passed down through countless experiences. The night continues slowly. There is no sudden dramatic moment, no great battle against the wilderness. Real survival is often quieter than stories suggest. It is a long series of careful decisions repeated every day. A person adds wood to the fire. Another person adjusts a sleeping hide. Someone checks the entrance. Someone comforts a child who wakes from a dream. Life continues. The cave remains peaceful. Outside, the ancient landscape stretches beneath the stars. Somewhere beyond the darkness, wolves move through their territory, following paths shaped by generations of movement. Inside, you feel the warmth of the fire reaching your hands. The stone wall behind you provides support. The breathing of your community creates a rhythm almost like a lullaby. You slowly close your eyes again. The sounds of the prehistoric night continue around you. The wind, the fire, the distant animals. The quiet voices of people who lived thousands of years before you, and for a moment, separated from the modern world. You experience something that connects every human who has ever searched for rest at the end of a long day. The simple hope that morning will arrive safely. The night grows deeper, and the presence of the wolves becomes easier to imagine. You still do not see them clearly. They remain beyond the reach of the firelight. Somewhere across the dark landscape where the grass moves beneath the cold air, and the moon quietly watches over everything below, you sit beside the small fire and listen. At first, the sounds seem random. A distant call, a movement through vegetation, a pause, then another sound. But as you spend more time in this ancient world, you begin to understand that the night has its own patterns. The wilderness is not silent. It is communicating constantly. The wolves are part of that conversation. Their voices travel through the darkness, sometimes close enough to make everyone become slightly more alert, sometimes fading until they become only a memory carried by the wind. The people inside the cave do not panic every time they hear them. They have lived alongside these animals long enough to understand that fear alone is not useful. Awareness is more important. You notice how everyone reacts differently. The youngest members of the group move closer to the warmth of the fire. Older individuals remain calm, watching and listening. Experience has taught them that many sounds outside are simply signs of animals moving through their own world. The wolves are hunting. They are not hunting because they know humans are inside the cave. They are hunting because nighttime is when many creatures become active. The ancient landscape belongs to many lives at once. A well-established fact from human prehistory is that wolves and humans shared overlapping territories for tens of thousands of years before domestication changed their relationship. Both species were adaptable hunters that could survive in different environments, and their encounters likely shape the future relationship between humans and dogs. But tonight, that future is still far away. You're experiencing a much earlier moment. The wolves outside are wild. The humans inside are learning how to survive. The distance between the two groups is measured not only by space but by uncertainty. You look toward the cave entrance and imagine the scene outside. The moonlight touches the ground. A group of wolves moves quietly across the landscape. Their bodies adapted for travel and endurance. They are following scents, reading tracks, and responding to the environment in ways that humans are also trying to understand. Both groups are watching. Both groups are learning. Both groups are trying to survive another night. The interesting thing is that prehistoric humans did not simply fear every predator they encountered. They developed strategies for living alongside dangerous animals. They selected sheltered locations, controlled fire, travelled in groups, and shared knowledge about the places where they lived. You think about how much confidence comes from community. One person alone in this landscape would face an overwhelming challenge. A small group, however, creates possibilities. Someone can gather wood while another watches the surroundings. Someone can care for children while another prepares tools. Someone can rest because another person is awake. The cave is protected not only by stone, it is protected by cooperation. A curious detail from Ice Age archaeology is that some cave sites contain remains and traces showing that humans repeatedly returned to familiar locations over generations. This suggests that certain shelters became part of remembered landscapes, places where people knew the surroundings and understood the resources available nearby. You imagine someone from thousands of years ago approaching this cave for the first time. They would notice the shape of the entrance. They would notice nearby water sources. They would notice animal paths. They would decide whether this place felt safe enough to spend the night. That decision could mean everything. The fire crackles softly, and you pull your animal hide closer around your shoulders. The cold air still finds its way inside. The ground still feels hard. The night is still unpredictable. Yet you're beginning to notice something surprising. The prehistoric night is not only frightening, it is beautiful. The darkness allows the stars to become brighter. The sounds of distant animals create a natural rhythm. The absence of modern noise makes every small detail feel important. You hear the breathing of someone sleeping nearby. You hear wood shifting in the fire. You hear the wind moving around the cave walls. Then, far away, another wolf call rises. The sound is haunting, but there is something almost peaceful about it. It reminds you that this world is still alive. The wilderness is not a place that exists only for humans. It is a place shared with countless other creatures. The wolves are not villains in this story. They're neighbours in a dangerous neighbourhood. A neighbourhood where everyone must understand boundaries. Scholars continue to examine how early humans perceived predators and whether encounters with animals influenced the development of human cooperation, communication, and planning. Some researchers suggest that living alongside predators encouraged stronger social bonds, while others believe many human behaviours develop from a much wider range of challenges. The truth is that survival rarely comes from one single cause. It comes from many small adaptations working together. You think about the people sleeping around you. They are not simply waiting for morning. They are participating in a tradition of survival that stretches back through countless generations. Every fire built, every shelter chosen, every lesson remembered contributes to the continuation of human life. The wolves outside eventually move farther away. Their sounds become softer. The landscape grows quieter again. Perhaps they have followed another trail. Perhaps they have found another place to search for food. Perhaps they simply continue their journey beneath the stars, inside the cave. The tension slowly fades. The people relax. The fire continues glowing. The night continues passing. You realize that the presence of wolves has changed the way you experience this sleep. Without them, the cave might feel like a simple shelter. With them nearby, every sound becomes meaningful. Every decision becomes connected to the larger world outside. This is what it means to sleep in prehistoric times. Resting does not mean forgetting the world. It means finding peace within it. You close your eyes and let the sound surround you, the gentle movement of flames, the quiet breathing of your companions, the distant footsteps of creatures moving through the ancient night, and somewhere beyond the darkness. The wolves continue their journey across the land, just as humans continue theirs inside the warmth of the cave. The fire's burned lower now, and the cave has entered the quietest part of the night. This is the hour when sleep becomes deepest, when the outside world feels far away, and when the smallest sounds become noticeable. Yet even in this peaceful moment, not everyone rests completely. Somebody remains awake. You notice a figure sitting near the fire, watching the flames slowly consume the wood. Their eyes are tired, but their attention remains focused. They are not staying awake because they enjoy missing sleep. They are awake because the group depends on them. This is the ancient responsibility of the night watcher. In your modern world, you might set an alarm, lock a door, or trust technology to alert you if something unusual happens. Here, protection comes from a person, a living, breathing member of the group takes on the role of listening, observing, and responding. The night watcher adjusts a piece of wood in the fire and looks toward the cave entrance. Nothing happens, and that is exactly the goal. A successful night is often a night where nothing dramatic occurs. You might imagine prehistoric survival as a constant series of exciting moments, with people fighting dangers every few minutes. But real life is usually much quieter. Much of survival is patience. It is sitting still. It is paying attention. It is waiting while the world continues moving around you. The person beside the fire understands this. They know the sounds of their own group. They know the difference between someone shifting in sleep and something unfamiliar approaching. They know how the wind usually sounds when it enters the cave. They know when the fire needs more attention. This knowledge is not written down. It is learned through experience. A widely accepted fact about prehistoric human communities is that cooperation played a major role in survival. Early humans lived in groups where individuals could share tasks, protect one another, care for children, and combine their skills. A single person facing the challenges of the ancient environment would have had far fewer chances than a coordinated community. You look at the sleeping people around you and realize that every person contributes, even when they are resting. The person who gathered food earlier, the person who repaired tools, the person who prepared the sleeping area, the person watching through the darkest hours. Everyone has a place. The night watcher occasionally looks outside. The entrance appears almost completely black, except for the faint outlines created by moonlight. Somewhere beyond that darkness, animals continue their movements. Perhaps the wolves have passed through the valley. Perhaps they're resting somewhere distant. Perhaps another creature is moving quietly through the landscape. The night watcher does not need to know every detail. They only need to notice changes. This is a skill modern people rarely practice. You're surrounded by information every moment of the day. But prehistoric humans depended on a different kind of awareness. Their attention was connected directly to their surroundings. The world spoke through small signs, a footprint, a broken branch, a change in the smell of the air, a different pattern of animal sounds, a strange silence. A quirky detail from ancient human studies is that some researchers believe prehistoric people may have developed extremely refined environmental awareness because their daily lives required constant observation. While we cannot know exactly how individuals experience their surroundings, archaeological evidence shows that many hunter-gatherer societies possess detailed knowledge of plants, animals, weather, and landscapes. You imagine spending one night with this level of attention. At first, it would probably feel exhausting. Every sound might seem important, every shadow might seem suspicious, but after living this way for years, your mind would adapt. What feels overwhelming to you would become normal to someone born into this world. The night watcher hears movement. Everyone remains asleep. The sound is only a piece of wood settling near the entrance. A small moment, a normal moment. The watcher relaxes again. You begin to understand that courage in the prehistoric world was not always dramatic. It was not always a person standing against danger with a weapon in hand. Sometimes courage was simply staying awake when everyone else needed rest. It was sitting quietly in the cold. It was accepting responsibility. It was protecting people you cared about. The fire creates soft patterns across the cave walls. The night watcher looks at those patterns for a moment, perhaps thinking about memories, family, or tomorrow's journey, even thousands of years ago. People likely had moments of reflection. They probably wondered about the future. They probably remembered the past. They probably felt comfort from seeing familiar faces nearby. Historians have different interpretations of how much emotional and symbolic thinking existed among prehistoric communities during different periods. Some scholars emphasize the evidence of creativity, ritual, and communication, while others remind us that interpreting ancient thoughts from physical remains is always challenging. Yet when you sit beside this fire, the distance between ancient people and modern people feels smaller. The details change, the tools change, the environment changes, but the feelings remain familiar. The desire to protect others, the comfort of belonging, the hope that morning arrives safely. The night continues. The watcher adds another small piece of wood to the fire. The flames rise slightly, bringing warmth back into the cave. A sleeping child moves closer to a family member. Someone quietly adjusts their position on the animal hide. Another person sighs softly and returns deeper into sleep. Life continues in small movements. The wolves outside are no longer the only thing you think about. You begin to notice the humans inside, their patience, their cooperation, their quiet strength. The cave is not simply a place where people hide from the wilderness. It is a place where people create their own world within the wilderness. The night watcher remains beside the fire a little longer. Their eyes follow the flames as the hours slowly pass. Soon another person may take their place. Soon the sky will begin changing colour. Soon the darkness will loosen its grip. But for now, this person stays awake, listening, watching, waiting, and because they do, everyone else can sleep. The night has settled into a steady rhythm, and you begin to notice something that feels surprisingly familiar. The cave is crowded. The sleeping spaces are close together, and privacy is almost non-existent. Yet there is a comfort in being surrounded by others. In this ancient world, sleeping is not a private activity separated from the community. It is something shared. You lie among your companions, hearing the quiet sounds of breathing, the occasional movement of someone adjusting their position, and the soft crackle of the fire nearby. The warmth from other bodies becomes part of the protection offered by the cave. The group itself becomes another layer of shelter. The stone walls keep out some of the cold. The fire provides light and warmth. The community provides security. You realise that the idea of sleeping alone would feel strange here. A person separated from the group would lose more than companionship. They would lose protection, information, and the immediate support needed in an unpredictable environment. A mainstream fact from prehistoric anthropology is that many early human societies relied heavily on cooperation because survival tasks such as finding food, caring for children, and responding to environmental challenges were easier when people worked together. Human beings developed as highly social creatures, and group living became one of the most important strategies for adapting to changing conditions. You look around the cave and see this strategy in action. Someone sleeps near the centre where warmth is strongest. Someone rests closer to the entrance, ready to notice changes outside. Children sleep near adults who can respond quickly if they wake during the night. Older members of the group rest among familiar faces. Every arrangement has a purpose. There is no carefully designed bedroom, no separate rooms, no quiet corner reserved only for one person. Instead, there is connection. You might find this difficult at first. After all, modern life has taught many people to value personal space, a quiet room, a comfortable bed, and a moment alone at the end of the day can feel essential. Here, the idea is different. The sound of another person breathing nearby is reassuring. A sleeping companion represents safety. A familiar voice represents belonging. The cave feels alive because people are inside it. You shift slightly on your bedding and feel the texture of the animal hide beneath you. It is not perfectly smooth. It carries the marks of a natural material shaped into something useful. The people here have transformed what the environment provides into something that supports life. Nothing is wasted. Every resource matters. The hide becomes warmth. The wood becomes fire. The stone becomes shelter. The bones and materials from animals may become tools. A curious detail from archaeological discoveries is that some prehistoric communities appear to have organized living spaces around shared activities, suggesting that caves and shelters were not simply places where people slept randomly. Evidence from certain sites indicates that people may have had areas for different purposes, showing planning and social organization. You imagine waking during the night and recognizing everyone around you without needing to see them clearly. You know the sound of each person's footsteps. You recognize the voices. You understand their habits. This familiarity creates a feeling that is difficult to describe. The ancient cave is filled with people who depend on one another. A parent protects a child. A skilled hunter teaches younger members. An experienced person shares knowledge about the landscape. A storyteller keeps memories alive. Even sleep becomes part of this larger human system. While some people rest, others remain aware. While some gather resources, others prepare food. While some learn, others teach. Everyone contributes to the survival of the group. The wolves outside remind you that the world remains uncertain, but the people inside the cave have created something powerful: trust. You think about how unusual this would feel compared with modern routines. Today, many people end their day alone, surrounded by objects designed for individual comfort. In this ancient setting, comfort comes from closeness, the warmth of the group, the sound of familiar voices, the knowledge that someone is nearby. The night becomes less frightening because it is experienced together. Researchers continue to discuss how social bonds developed among prehistoric humans and how much these relationships influence survival success. Some experts suggest that strong cooperation gave humans a major advantage over other species, while others emphasize that environmental adaptation, technology, and changing conditions were equally important parts of human development. The answer may not come from one single explanation. Human survival was always a combination of many abilities working together. You close your eyes again and listen carefully. The cave has its own quiet language, a small cough, a soft whisper. the movement of someone turning over, the gentle sound of the fire, the distant wind outside. All of these sounds remind you that you are part of something larger. The night watcher remains near the flames, but even they are connected to the sleeping group. Their responsibility exists because the community matters. Their wakefulness has meaning because others are resting. Slowly, you begin to understand that prehistoric sleep was not only about recovering energy, it was about maintaining relationships, it was about trust, it was about knowing that when you closed your eyes, someone else was sharing the responsibility of facing the unknown. A small child nearby wakes briefly and looks toward the fire. An adult gently offers reassurance, and the child settles again. The moment lasts only a few seconds, but it reveals something timeless. People have always comforted one another. Thousands of years pass, civilizations rise and disappear, technology changes completely. Yet the simple act of helping someone feel safe remains the same. The cave becomes quieter, the fire continues glowing. The wolves outside move somewhere beyond your awareness, and surrounded by your community, wrapped in warmth created through cooperation and patience, you begin to drift deeper into sleep. The ancient night no longer feels like a place of isolation. It feels like a shared experience. A moment where human beings gather together against uncertainty and discover that even in a world filled with danger, companionship can create a place of peace. The fire has become a gentle glow, and the cave walls around you seem to breathe with the movement of the fading flames. You remain still beneath the animal hide, listening to the quiet world that exists between waking and sleeping. The voices have disappeared now. The night watcher moves carefully nearby, and most of the group has entered the strange, mysterious place where the body rests but the mind continues travelling. Dreams. You wonder what the people around you dream about. Perhaps they dream of places they visited during the day. Perhaps they remember the river where they collected water, the open fields where they searched for food, or the animals they followed across the landscape. Perhaps they dream of people they love, people who are no longer nearby, or moments that happened many seasons before. Even in this ancient cave, the human mind continues creating worlds. You close your eyes and allow yourself to imagine what sleep might feel like thousands of years ago. The body relaxes on the rough bedding. The warmth of the fire reaches your face. The smell of smoke remains in the air. The distant sounds of the wilderness slowly become part of the background. The cave becomes a place between reality and imagination. A well-known discovery in human prehistory is that ancient people created symbolic art, including cave paintings and carved objects, showing that they were capable of complex imagination and communication. These artworks suggest that prehistoric humans were not only focused on immediate survival, they also thought about animals, experiences, relationships, and meanings beyond simple physical needs. You look toward the stone walls and imagine the hands that touch them before you. Someone may have stood here holding a piece of natural pigment. Someone may have carefully created a mark that would remain long after their own life ended. Someone may have looked at these walls and felt the same sense of wonder that you feel now. The cave is not only a shelter, it is a place where memories remain. You think about how different dreams might have been in this ancient environment. Today, people often dream about modern concerns, work, technology, conversations, responsibilities, and countless details from daily life can appear while we sleep. A prehistoric person would have carried different experiences into dreams, the rhythm of seasons, the movement of animals, the changing weather, the faces of family members, the search for food, the journey across unfamiliar land, the fire burning in the darkness, the world they knew would enter their sleeping minds. A quirky detail from studies of ancient symbolic behavior is that some prehistoric cave images appear to focus heavily on animals, especially powerful creatures that played important roles in human environments. Researchers continue exploring whether these images represented storytelling, spiritual beliefs, teaching methods, or personal expression. The meaning may have changed depending on the community that created them. You imagine a person sitting beside this same fire many thousands of years ago. Before sleeping, they might have listened to stories. They might have watched older members of the group explain important lessons. They might have heard descriptions of dangerous places, successful hunts, or journeys through unfamiliar landscapes. These stories would not simply entertain. They would prepare people for life. Knowledge travelled through voices, memory travelled through stories, experience travelled through generations. You begin to understand that the cave at night is not silent, even when everyone is asleep. The minds of these people continue carrying their world forward. The wolves outside remain part of this imagination. Perhaps a person dreams about hearing their calls. Perhaps a child imagines seeing them beyond the firelight. Perhaps an experienced hunter remembers encounters with them from earlier seasons. The animals around humans became part of human stories because they were part of human reality. Scholars have different interpretations of how prehistoric people understood dreams and whether dreaming played a role in early beliefs about the natural world. Some researchers think dreams may have influenced ideas about spirits, animals, and unseen forces, while others suggest that such interpretations are difficult to prove from archaeological evidence alone. The mystery itself is fascinating. A person thousands of years ago closed their eyes just like you do. Their body rested, their mind wandered, their imagination created scenes. The details of their dreams are lost forever, but the ability to dream connects them to every human who has slept before and every person sleeping tonight. You adjust your position slightly and feel the familiar comfort of the group around you. The cave remains dark, but your thoughts become lighter. You imagine walking through an ancient landscape. You see tall grasses moving beneath the wind. You see rivers reflecting the sky. You see animals travelling across the land. You see a small group of humans carrying fire, tools, and memories. The dream feels peaceful. There is no need to rush, no need to solve every mystery. The ancient world moves slowly. The stars move slowly. The fire burns slowly. The night passes slowly. And perhaps that slower rhythm allowed people to notice things that modern life often hides. The sound of rain on stone, the warmth of another person nearby, the changing smell of the air before weather arrives, the simple beauty of a flame in complete darkness. The cave teaches you that rest is not only the absence of activity. Rest is a connection between the body and the environment, a connection between one generation and another, a connection between memory and imagination. The fire finally becomes smaller, but the darkness no longer feels threatening. You know that beyond the entrance, the wilderness continues. The wolves may still be somewhere in the distance. The wind may still move across the valley, but inside this shelter, there is peace. You listen to the breathing of the people around you. You feel the warmth of the fire. You imagine the dreams of those who slept here long before you. And as your own thoughts become softer, you begin to drift into sleep, joining a tradition older than written language, older than cities, older than the countless stories humans would later tell about themselves. A night beneath stone, a fire nearby, a world outside waiting for morning. The dream slowly fades, but you do not wake completely. Instead, you remain in that quiet space between sleep and awareness, where the sounds around you become clearer. The cave is still dark, the fire is still glowing, the ancient night continues moving outside. You listen. This is the world before clocks, before artificial lights, before the soft background sounds of modern life that follow people almost everywhere. The prehistoric night is measured differently. It is measured by the movement of the stars, the changing temperature of the air, the fading strength of the fire, and the gradual approach of dawn. Every hour has its own character. You hear the wind first. It moves around the entrance of the cave, sometimes gently and sometimes with enough force to remind you that the outside world is always present. The stone walls create strange echoes, turning simple sounds into something larger. A small gust becomes a deep whisper. A distant movement becomes a mysterious signal. You understand why ancient people paid such close attention to sound. Sound was information. In the darkness. Your eyes are limited. The fire only illuminates a small area around the sleeping group, beyond that circle of warmth. Hearing becomes one of your most important senses. A branch breaking outside might mean an animal passing nearby. A sudden silence might suggest something has changed. A familiar sound might bring reassurance. The people around you have learned to separate ordinary noises from unusual ones. A widely recognized fact about prehistoric human survival is that early humans depended heavily on sensory awareness because they lived in environments where weather, animals, and landscapes could change quickly. Their ability to observe patterns in nature helped them find resources, avoid danger, and adapt to different environments. You imagine how different this must have felt compared with modern nights. Today, a person may sleep while machines quietly control temperature. Security systems protect buildings, and artificial lights keep the darkness away. Here, nothing interrupts the natural world. The cold arrives when the sun disappears. The darkness arrives when the sky changes. The sounds of animals continue whether humans are ready or not. You pull the hide closer and listen to the landscape breathing. The wolves are still part of that soundscape. Their presence is not constant, but their possibility remains. A distant howl can travel across open land with surprising power. It crosses valleys and hills, carrying information between animals that understand messages hidden within those sounds. Humans are listening too. Perhaps they do not understand every detail of the wolves' communication, but they recognize enough to respond. They know that certain sounds belong to certain creatures. They know when something feels ordinary and when something deserves attention. The relationship between humans and the natural world begins with observation. A small, unusual detail from prehistoric research is that some ancient communities may have used repeated locations and environmental signs, almost like a mental map, remembering where animals travelled, where water appeared, and where certain resources could be found. Their knowledge was not stored in books but carried through memory and shared experience. You think about how much information a person in this cave remembers. They remember the landscape. They remember seasons. They remember animal behavior. They remember safe paths. They remember dangerous places. Their minds carry an entire world. The night continues, and more sounds appear. A small creature moves through the nearby vegetation. The fire makes a quiet popping sound as a piece of wood shifts. Someone sleeping beside you changes position. A child briefly wakes and whispers before returning to rest. Every sound becomes part of the ancient song of the cave. You begin to notice that silence itself is different here. It is not the complete absence of sound. Instead, it is a mixture of countless small noises that modern ears often ignore. The ancient night is full. It is filled with movement, filled with life, filled with stories. You imagine a person from this time explaining the sounds around you. They might know exactly which bird makes a certain call. They might recognize the footsteps of animals moving across different surfaces. They might understand changes in the wind that suggest tomorrow's weather. This knowledge would be ordinary to them. To you, it would feel almost like a forgotten language. Researchers continue exploring how prehistoric humans interacted with their environments and how much detailed ecological knowledge they developed. Some specialists believe early humans possessed extremely sophisticated awareness of natural patterns, while others caution that archaeological evidence cannot reveal every aspect of ancient perception and experience. The mystery remains because the people who lived these nights left only fragments behind: a tool, a fire mark, a painting, a footprint, a piece of shelter. From these fragments, we try to imagine their world. And tonight, inside this cave, you are doing the same thing. You're not simply learning about prehistoric life. You're experiencing a moment. The fire becomes weaker, and the night watcher quietly adds another piece of wood. The flames rise again, briefly illuminating the stone walls. Shadows move across the cave surface like figures from another time. For a moment, you imagine that the shadows are memories. The memory of people gathering here. The memory of voices telling stories. The memory of children growing up beneath these rocks. The memory of countless nights when humans looked into the darkness and wondered what waited beyond the firelight. The wolves outside are part of those memories. So is the wind, so is the cold, so is the darkness. But so are the things that make the night bearable, the warmth of the fire, the closeness of the group, the comfort of familiar voices, the knowledge that morning will eventually arrive. You slowly return to sleep. The sounds of the ancient world continue around you, but they no longer feel threatening. They have become a rhythm, a natural melody created by wind, animals, fire, and human presence. The cave holds you gently. The wilderness continues outside. And somewhere beneath the same sky that covered those ancient landscapes, you rest alongside people who lived before history was written down. The night has continued for many hours, and the cave has settled into a deep quiet. The fire has become smaller, the sounds outside have softened, and the people around you remain wrapped in the slow rhythm of sleep. Yet among these sleeping figures are the youngest members of the group, the children. You look toward them and begin to imagine what this ancient night feels like through their eyes. For a child growing up in this world, the cave is not simply a place where frightening things happen. It is home. The stone walls, the firelight, the familiar voices, and the sounds of the surrounding landscape are all part of normal life. A modern child might fall asleep listening to a parent reading a story or hearing the quiet sounds of a household. A prehistoric child might fall asleep listening to the crackling fire, the voices of relatives, and the distant movements of animals beyond the entrance. The details are different. The feeling is remarkably similar. A child still wants comfort. A child still wants safety. A child still wants to know that someone familiar is nearby. You notice a young child shifting beneath a small hide. The darkness briefly causes them to wake. Their eyes search through the shadows until they recognize the familiar shapes around them. The fire, the family, the people they trust. Then they settle again. This simple moment connects across thousands of years. Children have always needed reassurance. A commonly accepted understanding from prehistoric studies is that young humans spent long periods learning skills from older members of their communities. Human childhood is unusually extended compared with many other animals, and this long period of learning helped children develop the knowledge necessary for survival in this cave. Learning does not happen only during the day. It happens constantly. A child learns from watching adults prepare food. A child learns by listening to stories. A child learns by observing how people respond to weather, animals, and unfamiliar situations. Even sleeping spaces become lessons. The child learns where it is safest to rest. The child learns how the group organizes itself. The child learns that the fire must be respected. The child learns that the sounds outside have meaning. You imagine being that child for a moment. The cave feels enormous. The shadows on the walls seem mysterious. The voices of adults seem full of hidden knowledge. Outside, the world is filled with creatures you are still trying to understand. The wolves are especially fascinating. Perhaps children are afraid of them. Perhaps they are curious. Perhaps they listen carefully whenever adults mention these animals. A wolf call in the distance might become a memory that stays with them for years. They might remember the sound of the night, the feeling of warmth beside the fire, and the way everyone became slightly more alert when those voices travelled across the landscape. A small fascinating detail from archaeological research is that some prehistoric sites contain evidence of children's activities, including small tools or marks that suggest young people participated in learning and daily life. These discoveries remind researchers that prehistoric children were not simply passive observers, they were active members of their communities. You look around the cave again. The adults are not only protecting children from the world, they are preparing them to understand it. Someone teaches which plants are useful. Someone explains which animals should be approached carefully. Someone demonstrates how to create tools. Someone shares stories about previous experiences. Knowledge moves from one generation to the next. The child sleeping near the fire represents the future of the group. Without teaching, knowledge disappears. Without children learning, survival becomes much harder. The cave is therefore not only a shelter for the present, it is a place where the future is being created. You think about how different childhood would feel here. There are no classrooms, no books, no screens filled with information. Learning happens through direct experience. The world itself becomes the teacher. The forest becomes a lesson. The river becomes a lesson. The animals become a lesson. The seasons become a lesson. Even the night becomes a lesson. The child learns that darkness does not always mean danger. Sometimes darkness simply means rest. The fire continues glowing, and the child moves closer to the warmth. An adult notices and gently adjusts the hide, offering silent comfort without waking anyone else. This small action feels timeless. A person caring for another person. A simple gesture of protection. A reminder that tenderness existed even in difficult environments. Scholars continue discussing how much emotional and social life in prehistoric communities can be reconstructed from archaeological evidence. Some researchers believe early humans developed complex family bonds and teaching systems similar in importance to those found in many societies today, while others emphasize that ancient social structures may have varied greatly between groups and periods. The truth is that prehistoric life was not a single experience. Different communities had different traditions, different landscapes created different challenges, different families created different ways of living. But wherever humans lived, children needed guidance, they needed care, they needed stories, they needed a place where they could close their eyes and feel protected. The night slowly moves toward morning. Although the sun is still far away, the child sleeps peacefully now. The sounds outside continue, but they are no longer the center of attention. The focus returns to the people inside, their shared warmth, their quiet movements, their connection. You realize that this cave contains more than survival. It contains childhood memories. A child who once slept here may have remembered this place for their entire life. They may have remembered the smell of smoke, the sound of voices, and the feeling of lying close to family beneath the stone ceiling. Those memories may have shaped who they became, just as your own childhood memories shape you. The distance between ancient and modern life becomes smaller. Thousands of years separate you from this child, but the experience of feeling safe beside people who care about you remains familiar. The wolves continue somewhere beyond the darkness. The fire continues glowing. The cave continues holding its sleeping community. And as you drift deeper into rest, you imagine the child beside you dreaming of tomorrow. Tomorrow they may explore. Tomorrow they may learn. Tomorrow they may walk beneath the same sky that has watched over generations of humans before them. For now, they sleep, and the ancient cave sleeps with them. The fire is no longer a roaring flame. It has become a steady glow, a quiet companion that has remained with you throughout the long night. You watch the small pieces of wood turning into embers and realize that this simple source of warmth has transformed everything about human life inside the cave. Without fire, this place would feel completely different. The stone walls would hold the cold more strongly. The darkness would feel heavier. the night would become much more difficult. But because of fire, the cave becomes a place where people can rest, communicate, and survive. You move your hands closer to the warmth and feel the gentle heat reaching your fingers. The smoke rises slowly, carrying the scent of burned wood into the darkness above. The smell is familiar now. It has become part of the atmosphere of this ancient home. Fire is not just something burning in front of you. It is a foundation of survival. A major fact established through archaeological research is that controlled fire use became one of the most important developments in human history. Fire allowed early humans to cook food, stay warm, protect themselves from some dangers, and extend activity into the night. It changed the way people interacted with their environment and with each other. You look around the cave and see evidence of this transformation everywhere. People are gathered together because of the fire. Food was prepared because of the fire. Stories are shared because of the fire. Tools can be improved because of the fire. The night itself becomes possible because of the fire, before humans could reliably control flames. Darkness after sunset created a much greater barrier. The day ended when light disappeared. But fire allowed humans to carry a small piece of daylight into the night. A tiny sun created by human effort. You think about how extraordinary that must have felt. Imagine living in a world where darkness arrives every evening and covers everything. Then imagine discovering that you can create your own light. You can gather branches, protect glowing embers, and bring warmth wherever your group travels. This ability would have changed not only survival but imagination itself. The night became a time for more than hiding. It became a time for connection. A person sitting beside the fire could share memories. A parent could teach a child. A group could plan the next day. People could simply sit together and experience being human. You notice that the fire creates a special kind of atmosphere. Faces become visible. Expressions can be understood. Small gestures become meaningful. The cave that was once only stone becomes a gathering place. A curious detail from prehistoric research is that some ancient hearths show signs of repeated use over long periods, suggesting that fire locations may have become important centres of activity within shelters. In some cases, the remains of ancient fires provide clues about what people cooked, what materials they used, and how they organised their daily lives. You imagine generations of people sitting around similar flames, different individuals, different stories, different nights, yet the same basic need: warmth, safety, connection. The fire also changes the relationship between humans and the animals outside. The wolves beyond the cave entrance represent a world where humans are not the only powerful creatures. They are intelligent hunters adapted to their environment, but inside the cave, the fire creates a boundary, not an absolute barrier, a psychological one. The glow tells humans that they have created a protected space. You understand why the fire would become so important emotionally as well as physically. It represents control in a world where people had very little control. They cannot stop storms. They cannot change the seasons. They cannot command the animals, but they can keep a flame alive. They can protect it. They can pass it from one generation to another. That small achievement carries enormous meaning. You watch the person responsible for tending the fire carefully rearrange the wood. They do not waste fuel. They understand that every piece matters. A careless mistake could leave the group colder during the darkest hours. This responsibility requires attention and patience, the same qualities that help people survive in the wilderness. The night continues quietly. The fire creates shadows that move across the cave walls. They stretch and shrink as the flames change. Perhaps ancient people looked at these shadows and imagined shapes. Perhaps they told stories inspired by the movement of light and darkness. We cannot know exactly what thoughts passed through their minds, but we can understand the experience. Sitting beside a fire at night has always encouraged reflection. Researchers continue examining how fire influenced human behaviour and social development. Some scholars suggest that evenings around the fire helped create more opportunities for communication, storytelling, and cultural traditions. Others argue that the timing and importance of these changes developed differently among various human groups and cannot be explained by fire alone. The relationship between humans and fire is complex, it is practical, it is emotional, it is cultural. It is deeply connected to the human story. You return your attention to the cave, the children sleep, the night watcher remains nearby, the wolves are somewhere beyond the entrance, and between all of these things is the fire, the quiet center of this ancient world. You begin to appreciate something that modern life often hides. Many things that seem ordinary today were once extraordinary achievements. A warm room, a safe place to sleep, a light during darkness. These comforts have long histories. They were built from countless discoveries made by people who lived through difficult conditions and continued experimenting, learning, and adapting. The fire slowly becomes smaller, but nobody ignores it. Even as people rest, it remains part of their awareness. Someone will wake to add wood. Someone will protect the embers. Someone will make sure that the warmth continues, because tomorrow depends on tonight. The cave remains calm. The ancient night continues, and you lie beside the glowing fire, feeling connected to every person who has ever gathered around a flame to escape the cold darkness outside. The fire has become a quiet companion through the deepest hours of the night, but now your thoughts turn toward the creatures that share this ancient landscape with you. The cave is not an isolated world. Beyond the stone walls, countless animals are moving, resting, searching, and surviving in the same environment that humans call home. Among those animals, the wolves remain the most fascinating. You think about the sounds you heard earlier, the distant calls travelling through the darkness, the movement beyond the entrance, the invisible presence of creatures living their own lives under the same sky. The wolves are not simply a threat, they are part of the story of this place. You imagine looking outside at the edge of the firelight. The landscape stretches into the darkness. The ground carries signs of movement. The air carries scents that tell different animals where others have been. A wolf moving through this world is not wandering without purpose. It follows paths, searches for food, communicates with its group, and responds to changes around it in many ways. Wolves and humans share something important. Both are social, both depend on cooperation, both learn from one another. A widely supported fact from evolutionary research is that the relationship between humans and wolves eventually led to the domestication of dogs. One of the earliest and most significant examples of animal domestication. The exact process happened over a long period and likely involved many different interactions between humans and wolf populations. But tonight, that future has not fully arrived. You're still living in a world where wolves remain wild. The relationship is uncertain. The boundary between fear and curiosity is still forming. You watch the sleeping group around you and think about how often humans and wolves must have encountered one another. They travelled through similar landscapes. They followed similar prey. They depended on similar resources. Sometimes they competed. Sometimes they may have learned from each other. Sometimes they may have simply ignored one another. The ancient world was not divided into separate categories of human spaces and animal spaces. Everything overlapped. A forest belonged to many creatures. A river belonged to many creatures. A valley belonged to many creatures. Humans were one part of a larger system. You notice how this understanding changes the way you see the wolves outside. They are not waiting for a dramatic moment. They are simply living. They are following instincts shaped by countless generations. A small but interesting detail from studies of early human and wolf relationships is that some researchers believe wolves may have been attracted to human camps because of opportunities created by leftover food and safer environments near people. This idea suggests that the relationship may have started with curiosity and gradual familiarity rather than a single dramatic event. Imagine that. A wolf standing near an ancient campsite. A human noticing the animal, a moment of uncertainty. A moment that might eventually change the history of two species. Of course, we cannot know exactly how every interaction happened. The past does not leave behind complete conversations or personal memories. It leaves traces, bones, tools, shelters, genetic evidence from these pieces. Researchers try to understand a relationship that unfolded over thousands of years. The fire crackles softly as you think about the possibility that the same type of animal once outside this cave may eventually become the companion sleeping beside human families. The transformation is remarkable. A creature once viewed as a competitor could become a trusted partner. A wild hunter could become a protector. An animal following its own path could eventually follow human footsteps. Experts continue to examine how wolf domestication began, and whether it happened through deliberate human actions, natural cooperation, or a combination of many factors. Some researchers suggest that certain wolves may have gradually adapted to human environments, while others argue that humans played a more active role in selecting and shaping early dog populations. The mystery remains because this relationship developed before written records existed. You return to the present moment. Tonight, you're not living beside a domesticated animal. You're sharing a landscape with a wild one. The difference matters. The people inside the cave understand respect. They do not assume every animal can be approached. They do not believe the wilderness exists only for their use. They observe, they adapt, they maintain distance when necessary. This attitude allows them to survive. You think about how much modern humans have separated themselves from the natural world. Many people today encounter animals through screens, books, or carefully controlled environments in this ancient setting. Animals are not distant ideas. They are neighbours. Their presence affects decisions. Their movements influence travel. Their behaviour teaches lessons. The wolf outside is part of the education of living here. You imagine a young person in the cave learning about wolves from older members of the group. They might learn how to recognise tracks. They might learn when wolves are nearby. They might learn that animals should be understood rather than simply feared. Knowledge creates confidence. Fear often comes from uncertainty. The more people understand their environment, the better they can respond to it. The night continues peacefully. The wolves are no longer close enough for you to hear clearly, but their presence remains in your thoughts. They represent something important about prehistoric life. Humans survived not by escaping nature completely. They survived by understanding it. The cave, the fire, the animals, and the landscape all belong to one connected story. You feel the warmth of the fire against your face and listen to the quiet breathing of the people around you. The same world that contains danger also contains beauty. The same wilderness that creates challenges also provides resources. The ancient night is not only about fear, it is about relationships. Relationships between humans. Relationships between humans and animals. Relationships between living creatures and the environment around them. The wolves continue their journey somewhere beyond the darkness. The humans continue theirs inside the cave. Two species, one landscape, one long-shared history slowly unfolding beneath the stars. The deepest part of the night has arrived. The cave feels different now. The excitement of evening has disappeared. The conversations have ended. The fire has become a quiet glow rather than a bright centre of activity. The wolves outside have faded into the distance, and the world seems to be holding still. But time continues. You remain awake for a little while longer, feeling the slow movement of the hours before dawn. This is the part of the night that tests patience. It is not dramatic. It is not filled with constant danger. It is simply long, very long. you begin to understand one of the greatest challenges of prehistoric sleep: waiting in modern life. Darkness can be interrupted easily. A person can turn on a light, check the time, listen to music, or distract themselves whenever they feel uncomfortable. Here, the night must simply be experienced. There is no shortcut. You wait with the fire. You wait with the sleeping group. You wait with the ancient landscape outside. The hours pass through small changes. The temperature drops slightly. The fire needs attention. The air feels heavier. The sounds of the wilderness change. You notice how carefully the people around you respond to these changes. They do not need a device to tell them the night is moving forward. Their bodies and senses have learned the rhythm of the environment. A recognized fact from research into prehistoric communities is that many hunter-gatherer groups organize daily activities around natural cycles such as daylight, seasons, and available resources without artificial lighting. Human activity was naturally influenced by the rising and setting of the sun, although different groups adapted in different ways. You imagine how unusual this would feel today. Most modern people experience time through numbers, hours, minutes, schedules, appointments. The prehistoric world measures time through experiences: the warmth of afternoon sunlight, the arrival of evening shadows, the moment when animals become active, the return of morning light. The night is not divided into exact pieces. It flows. You look toward the cave entrance again. The darkness outside is beginning to change, although you can barely notice it yet. The deepest black is slowly becoming softer. The stars remain visible, but the sky will eventually begin preparing for another day. Before that happens, there is still time. You listen to the breathing of your companions. Some sleep deeply, some shift occasionally, some wake briefly and return to rest. Sleep is not a perfect, uninterrupted state. Even in the modern world, humans naturally move through different stages of rest. The people in this cave experience the same basic patterns, although their environment creates different challenges. A small interesting observation from studies of traditional societies is that sleep patterns among some non-industrial communities do not always match the common modern idea of everyone sleeping continuously for one long period in complete darkness. Researchers have found that human sleep can be influenced by environment, temperature, social habits, and cultural expectations. You think about that while lying beneath your animal hide. Perhaps prehistoric nights were not simply 8 silent hours. Perhaps people woke, talked quietly, tended fires, cared for children, watched the surroundings, and returned to sleep. Perhaps the night itself was a time of small activities, a time for reflection, a time for connection. The person near the fire adds another piece of wood, and the flames rise briefly. The light touches the cave walls, revealing marks left by earlier moments of human activity. You wonder about all the nights these walls have witnessed. How many people sat here? How many children fell asleep here? How many fires burned in this same place? How many times did humans wait for morning? The cave has become a witness to patience. The wolves outside have also become part of that memory, not because every night involved danger, but because their existence reminded humans that the natural world continued beyond their small circle of warmth. The presence of predators shaped awareness. The presence of weather shaped preparation. The presence of darkness shaped cooperation. You realize that survival was not about defeating the night. It was about learning how to live with it. Researchers continue examining how prehistoric humans balance vulnerability and adaptation during nighttime hours. Some specialists believe sleeping arrangements, fire use, and group organization were closely connected to reducing risks from predators and environmental conditions, while others point out that prehistoric communities were diverse and may have developed many different strategies. There was no single prehistoric night. There were countless nights. Each group had its own landscape. Each family had its own routines. Each cave held different memories. You slowly become aware of something comforting. The people here are not waiting helplessly for sunrise. They are living, even during darkness, even during uncertainty. Even when the wolves are somewhere beyond the entrance, life continues. Someone dreams, someone watches, someone rests, someone remembers. The ancient night is filled with quiet human moments. A parent checks on a child, a person adjusts a sleeping hide, someone smiles at a memory, someone listens to the fire. These small actions may never appear in grand histories, but they represent the majority of human existence. Most of life has always been made of ordinary moments. Sleeping, waiting, sharing warmth, protecting others, preparing for tomorrow. The sky outside slowly begins to lose some of its deepest darkness. You sense that morning is approaching, although the cave remains mostly unchanged. The fire still glows, the people still sleep, the wilderness still surrounds you, but something is different. The longest hours have passed. The difficult waiting is almost complete. Soon, light will return to the landscape. Soon, the wolves will disappear into the distance. Soon, the people inside the cave will begin another day of searching, learning, creating, and surviving. For now, you remain still. You listen to the final moments of the ancient night, the fire, the wind, the quiet breathing of your community, and you understand that before every sunrise, there is always this moment, the calm before the world wakes. The first signs of morning begin to appear, but the cave does not immediately transform. The ancient night does not end with a sudden change. Instead, it slowly releases its hold. The darkness becomes softer. The air begins to shift. The sleeping figures around you gradually return to awareness. The world wakes gently. You remain still for a moment, remembering everything that surrounded you during the night. The fire, the voices, the wolves beyond the entrance. The quiet responsibility of the night watcher. The warmth created by a group of people sharing one small space. The cave feels different now because you understand it differently. At the beginning of the night, it seemed like a place of protection from danger. Now you see something more. This shelter was not only a place where humans escaped the outside world, it was a place where humans created a world of their own. Inside these stone walls, people built relationships, shared knowledge, raised children, and created memories. The cave was not simply a hiding place, it was a center of life. You watch as the first person begins moving. The night watcher stretches after many hours beside the fire. They carefully examine the remaining embers, making sure the warmth has not disappeared completely. Another person wakes and quietly prepares for the day ahead. Nobody rushes. The morning begins through small actions. Someone folds the sleeping hides, someone checks tools, someone looks outside, someone prepares food. The rhythm of life returns. A well-supported fact from archaeology is that many prehistoric shelters were used for a variety of activities beyond sleeping, including tool production, food preparation, and social gatherings. These discoveries show that caves and rock shelters often served as important places where communities organized daily life. You look around and imagine the countless mornings that began here. A person opening their eyes beneath the same stone ceiling, a family preparing to leave for the day, a group discussing where to search for resources, a child learning from older members. Each morning continued a story that had already lasted for generations. You step closer to the cave entrance and feel the morning air. It is cooler than you expected. The smell of wet earth and plants reaches you. Outside, the landscape that seemed mysterious during the night becomes visible again. The world has returned. The grasses move with the wind. Birds begin their calls. Animals leave traces of their nighttime movements. The wolves are gone from sight. Perhaps they have moved deeper into the landscape. Perhaps they are resting after their own night of activity. Their story continues just as yours does. You think about how different the morning must feel after a night spent listening to predators nearby. Today, many people wake up without thinking about the possibility of danger outside their homes. The first moments of the day may involve checking messages, making coffee, or preparing for work. Here, the first thoughts are different. Is the weather favourable? Is the group ready? Are the tools prepared? Where will everyone travel today? The environment shapes every decision. A fascinating detail from prehistoric landscape studies is that some ancient communities appear to have returned repeatedly to familiar locations because they provided reliable advantages such as shelter, nearby resources, or strategic positions. A cave could become meaningful not because it was permanent, but because it was remembered. Memory itself became a survival tool. Knowing where to find water, knowing where animals travel, knowing which places are safe, knowing which shelters offer protection. The landscape was filled with information. You imagine a person teaching another person how to understand this place. They might point toward distant mountains. They might describe seasonal changes. They might explain which areas should be avoided. They might share stories about previous journeys. Knowledge travels through human voices. The cave stores some memories in its walls, but many more survive only through people. Researchers continue discussing how prehistoric groups used and valued different shelters. Some experts believe certain caves became important cultural spaces with strong emotional meaning, while others suggest many shelters were chosen mainly because they offered practical advantages. The reality may have changed depending on the environment and the people who used each location. You return your attention to the cave. The fire is smaller now. The sleeping area is being organized. The night has become a memory, but the experience remains. You understand something about ancient life that is easy to overlook. These people were not simply surviving from one danger to another. They were living. They laughed. They cared. They taught. They remembered. They created moments of comfort in difficult circumstances. The wolves outside were part of their world, but they were not the whole story. The cold was part of their world, but it was not the whole story. The darkness was part of their world, but it was not the whole story. Human beings have always found ways to create meaning. You look back toward the sleeping area one final time. The place where you rested during the night now appears ordinary again. A section of stone, a patch of ground, a place where a fire burned. Yet, after experiencing the night, you know it holds more than that. It holds the memory of countless evenings, countless conversations, countless moments when humans gathered together and faced uncertainty. The morning continues brightening. The people prepare to step outside. The ancient world waits. There are tasks ahead, food to find, tools to use, journeys to make. Another day begins. But the night remains important, because every day of human history begins after someone finds a way to rest through the darkness. You leave the cave entrance behind and imagine the first rays of sunlight touching the landscape. The same land that felt mysterious at night now reveals its details again. The path, the trees, the distant hills, the places where animals travelled. The world has changed from a place of shadows into a place of possibilities, and somewhere beyond the horizon. The wolves continue their own journey. Humans continue theirs. Different paths, connected landscapes, one ancient morning after another. You step beyond the cave entrance as morning fully arrives, leaving behind the warmth of the fire and the quiet darkness where you spent the night. The change is almost overwhelming. After hours of seeing the world only through flickering flames and shadows, daylight reveals every detail that was hidden before. The landscape stretches outward. The ground beneath your feet carries signs of the night. Small tracks cross the soil. Plants are bent where creatures move through them. The air feels fresh and open. The same wilderness that seemed mysterious and endless in the darkness now appears like a familiar place waiting to be understood. You look back at the cave, From outside, it appears simple. Just stone, just an opening in the landscape. But you know what happened inside. You know that behind those walls were moments of warmth, cooperation, teaching, and rest. You know that the cave was not important because it was impressive. It was important because humans gave it meaning. A shelter becomes a home through memory. You watch the group begin the morning routine. Some people prepare what they need for the day. Others examine the surroundings. Children move carefully near adults, observing and learning. The night is finished, but the lessons of the night remain. A recognized fact from prehistoric studies is that early human groups were highly mobile in many environments, often moving between different locations depending on seasons, resources, and opportunities. Shelters such as caves and rock overhangs were valuable because they provided protection while allowing people to continue adapting to changing conditions. This morning, the cave may not be occupied forever. The group may leave, they may return later. Another group may use the same shelter many years afterward. The cave belongs to no single moment. It belongs to a long chain of human experiences. You walk around the entrance and imagine all the decisions that brought people here. They had to notice the landscape. They had to understand the environment. They had to recognize advantages that were not obvious at first glance. A good shelter was not simply a place with a roof. It needed access to resources. It needed protection from weather. It needed a location that made sense for daily life. Finding such a place required knowledge. You think about the person who first discovered this cave. Perhaps they were travelling through unfamiliar territory. Perhaps they noticed the shape of the rocks, the protection from wind, and the signs of nearby resources. Perhaps they stopped here for only one night. Perhaps that single decision influenced generations. A small choice can create a long history. A curious detail from archaeological research is that some caves contain evidence from multiple periods of human activity, showing that different groups returned to the same places long after previous occupants had disappeared. These layers of occupation allow researchers to glimpse fragments of human life separated by thousands of years. You imagine those layers, one fire after another, one family after another, one generation after another, the same stone walls watching everything. The morning sun rises higher, and you notice the difference between the world inside and outside the cave. Inside, humans created a small controlled environment. Outside, nature continues without interruption. Animals follow their instincts. Weather follows its patterns. Rivers continue flowing. Plants continue growing. The ancient world does not stop because humans are present. Instead, humans learn how to move within it. You think about the wolves again. During the night, they represented uncertainty. Their distant calls reminded everyone that the wilderness was nearby. Now, in daylight, their presence feels different. They are part of the landscape. They belong here too. Perhaps they are resting after travelling during the night. Perhaps they are caring for their own group. Perhaps they are simply following paths that existed long before humans noticed them. The world contains many stories happening at the same time. Humans have one story. Wolves have another. The landscape connects them. Researchers continue exploring how prehistoric humans understood and interacted with their surroundings. Some specialists believe people developed detailed mental maps of their environments through generations of observation, while others emphasize that our interpretations are limited because ancient experiences were rarely preserved directly. You look across the land and understand why. A landscape can be known in many ways. A scientist may study it through evidence. A traveller may understand it through experience. A person living there may understand it through memory. For the people of this cave, the landscape is not simply a place, it is part of life. Every hill has a story, every path has a memory, every season leaves a mark. You imagine leaving this cave with the group. The journey ahead is uncertain, but the people are prepared. They carry knowledge with them, they carry tools, they carry memories of places that help them survive. The most important thing they carry is understanding. They know that survival is not about controlling everything, it is about adapting. The morning continues. The fire inside the cave slowly becomes colder. The sleeping area becomes empty. The sounds of human activity move away from the entrance. Soon, the cave will become quiet again, but it will not be forgotten. The stone will remain. The traces will remain. The memories, even if invisible, will remain connected to the place. You stand for a final moment near the entrance and look back. The cave that protected you during the night now appears almost peaceful and ordinary. Yet beneath that ordinary appearance is something extraordinary, a record of human persistence, a reminder that people thousands of years ago faced uncertainty and still found moments of comfort. They experienced fear, they experienced curiosity, they experienced connection. They slept beneath stone while wolves travelled outside, and they woke up. Again and again, morning after morning. The journey continues beyond the cave. The landscape opens ahead. The day begins, and behind you, the ancient shelter quietly holds the memory of another night that has passed. The cave is quiet again. The morning has moved forward, and the people who rested beneath the stone ceiling have returned to the activities of the day. Yet the shelter remains behind, holding traces of what happened there. The fire has faded. The sleeping spaces have been disturbed. Small marks remain where people gathered, worked, and rested. To someone passing by in the distant future, these traces might appear meaningless, but they are pieces of a story. You stand near the cave entrance and imagine all the moments hidden within these walls. A person warming their hands beside the fire, a parent comforting a child during a stormy night, a group sharing food after a long journey, someone listening carefully as wolves moved through the darkness outside. The cave remembers, not like a person remembers, not with thoughts or emotions. It remembers through traces, through marks, through objects, through the remains of human activity. A well-established fact from archaeology is that caves and rock shelters have preserved some of the most valuable evidence about prehistoric human life, because their protected environments can help preserve tools, artwork, and other remains for thousands of years. These locations offer researchers rare glimpses into the daily experiences of people who lived long before written history. You look at the stone walls and imagine how many stories they could contain. A scratch from a tool, a darkened area from repeated fires, a mark left by someone preparing materials, a surface touched by countless hands. Every detail connects the present to the past. The most remarkable thing is that these traces often come from ordinary moments, not battles, not royal ceremonies, not famous events, just life, sleeping, eating, working, learning, waiting, the things that fill most human existence. You think about the night you experienced here. It was not a dramatic adventure. The wolves did not attack. The fire did not disappear. The cave did not collapse. Instead, something much more realistic happened. People lived. They adapted. They rested. They continued. That is what makes these moments important. History is not only created by extraordinary events, it is also created by countless ordinary nights that allowed humans to survive long enough to build the future. A fascinating detail from prehistoric discoveries is that some cave sites contain layers of activity separated by long periods, allowing researchers to study how different generations used the same locations in different ways. A place that served as shelter for one group might later become meaningful for another, creating a long record of human interaction with the landscape. You imagine these layers beneath your feet. One generation sits around a fire. Another generation returns centuries later. Another leaves their own traces. The cave becomes a meeting point between different moments in time. The people who used this shelter never knew their actions would one day be studied. They were not trying to create historical evidence. They were simply living. They were making decisions based on what they needed at that moment where to sleep, where to gather, how to stay warm, how to protect their families, how to understand the world around them. And yet those choices became messages carried across thousands of years. You consider the relationship between memory and physical places. Today, people preserve memories through photographs, recordings, and written messages. Prehistoric humans had fewer ways to leave behind personal records, but the places they used became part of their story. A cave could hold memories without words. A fire could leave a mark. A tool could reveal a skill. A painting could express an idea. The landscape itself became an archive. Researchers continue examining how much meaning prehistoric people attached to specific places. Some experts believe certain caves had strong symbolic importance beyond practical shelter, while others suggest that many locations were mainly valued because they provided useful resources and protection. Perhaps both ideas can be true. A place can be practical and meaningful at the same time. A home is valuable because it protects you, but it is also valuable because of the memories created there. You look back toward the cave entrance and imagine the people who slept there. They may have felt the same comfort you felt. They may have looked at the same walls and listened to the same sounds of wind moving across the landscape. The distance between you and them becomes smaller. Different tools, different clothing, different environment, but the same human experiences. A person feeling tired after a long day, a person feeling grateful for warmth, a person finding comfort beside others, a person hoping tomorrow will be better. The wolves outside also become part of this memory. Their presence reminds you that prehistoric life was shaped by relationships between many forms of life. Humans did not exist separately from nature. They existed within it. The wolves travelled. The humans travelled. The seasons changed. The landscape transformed. Everything continued. You walk a little farther from the cave and imagine the shelter slowly disappearing into the distance. Over time, plants may grow around the entrance. Weather may change the stone. The sounds of human voices may fade, but the place remains. The cave becomes a quiet message from the past, a reminder that people were here. They struggled. They adapted. They cared for one another. They slept through difficult nights. They watched the sunrise. They continued. The story of prehistoric life is sometimes described as a story of survival, and that is true, but it is also a story of creativity, connection, and memory. The cave was not only where people escaped danger, it was where people created meaning. It was where children learned, where families rested, where knowledge was shared, where humans faced the darkness and discovered that they could create their own light. You take one final look at the stone walls, the same walls that protected people during nights when wolves moved outside, the same walls that witnessed thousands of quiet moments, the same walls that carried memories long after the people themselves were gone, and you understand that every ancient shelter has a hidden story, not only about how humans survived, but about how humans lived. The cave is behind you now, but the feeling of that night remains with you. As you move through the ancient landscape, you carry a different understanding of prehistoric sleep. It was not simply a moment when humans closed their eyes and waited for morning. It was a complicated balance between vulnerability and preparation, between the need for rest and the need to remain aware. You begin thinking about how people today try to understand those distant nights. The evidence is incomplete. The voices of the people who lived there are gone. Their thoughts, dreams, and personal experiences were never written down, yet through careful study, researchers continue to uncover pieces of their lives. A broadly accepted fact from archaeology is that scientists study prehistoric humans through many forms of evidence, including stone tools, animal remains, ancient shelters, genetic information, and environmental changes. No single discovery tells the entire story. Instead, many small pieces must be combined to create a clearer picture of human life in the distant past. You imagine researchers standing inside a cave thousands of years after the last fire burned there. They examine the ground carefully. They look at tiny fragments left behind. They search for clues about how people used the space. A small piece of charcoal may reveal that a fire once burned. A mark on stone may reveal human activity. A collection of objects may suggest how people organize their daily routines. Each discovery becomes a small window into another world. But understanding prehistoric sleep is especially challenging. Sleep leaves fewer traces than hunting, tool-making, or artistic expression. A person's dreams disappear. Their thoughts disappear. Their feelings during a quiet night beside a fire disappear. What remains are only clues. You think about the sleeping space from the night before. The animal hides are gone. The warmth of the fire has faded. The voices of the group are silent. Yet you can still imagine the experience. The cold air, the sound of breathing, the distant movement of wolves, the comfort of knowing others were nearby. This is where imagination and research meet. A curious detail from prehistoric studies is that some ancient shelters preserve evidence of repeated human presence over extremely long periods, meaning the same locations may have been used by people separated by many generations. A cave could become a place where different moments of human history overlapped, even though the people who visited it never met. You think about that connection. A person thousands of years ago may have looked at the same stone surface. They may have rested near the same entrance. They may have listened to the same wind. The circumstances were different, but the human experience was familiar. Researchers continue to disagree about whether prehistoric sleeping arrangements were mainly shaped by protection from predators, social traditions, environmental conditions, or a combination of all these factors. Some believe the organization of sleeping areas reveals careful planning, while others suggest that many patterns developed naturally through repeated habits. The uncertainty does not make the story less interesting, it makes it more human. The prehistoric world was not a simple place with one universal way of living. Different groups faced different landscapes. A community living near icy northern plains experienced different challenges from one living in warmer forests or coastal regions. Their nights were different. Their shelters were different. Their relationships with animals were different. Yet everywhere humans lived. They needed rest, they needed safety, they needed connection. You think about how much modern sleep depends on technology, temperature control, comfortable materials, artificial lighting, and secure buildings all shape the way many people experience nighttime. The prehistoric night removed those layers. It brought humans closer to their environment. The cold was real. The darkness was real. The sounds outside were real. But so was the warmth of the fire. So was the comfort of community. So was the feeling of waking up after another successful night. The ancient people who slept in caves were not simply surviving in a primitive world. They were solving problems with the resources available to them. They observed, experimented, remembered, and adapted. Those abilities remain part of humanity today. You look across the landscape and imagine the knowledge carried by prehistoric people. They knew where animals travelled. They knew how weather changed. They knew which places offered protection. They knew how to work together. Much of this knowledge was invisible because it existed in memory rather than written records. A person's mind was a library. A story was a teaching tool. A shared experience was a lesson. The night beside the wolves becomes a symbol of something larger. It represents the long relationship between humans and uncertainty. Every generation has faced unknown challenges. Every generation has searched for safety. Every generation has found ways to create comfort. The details change, but the pattern remains. You return in your thoughts to the cave entrance. The wolves have disappeared into the distance. The fire has become cold. The sleeping area is empty, but the meaning of the place remains. It reminds you that humans have always lived between danger and hope. They have always looked into darkness and searched for light. They have always needed one another. Modern people often imagine progress as a journey away from the ancient world. In many ways, that is true. Technology has transformed human life beyond anything prehistoric communities could have imagined. But some things have not changed. People still gather around warmth. People still tell stories. People still protect those they love. People still look for peaceful moments at the end of the day. The cave night connects these experiences across time. You are separated from those ancient sleepers by thousands of years, but not by everything. Their world was different. Their challenges were different. Their tools were different, but their need for rest and reassurance was deeply familiar. The ancient cave becomes less like a forgotten place and more like a reminder. A reminder that every human generation has searched for a safe place to sleep. A reminder that survival is not only about strength. It is also about cooperation, creativity, and care. And as you continue walking through the prehistoric landscape, you carry with you the memory of that quiet night beneath stone, the fire, the community, the wolves outside, the slow movement toward morning, a moment that disappeared long ago, yet still tells a story about what it means to be human. The journey returns you once more to the ancient cave, not because you need protection from the cold, not because wolves are waiting beyond the entrance, not because the night is dangerous. You return because some places stay with you. The cave has become more than a shelter in your memory. It has become a doorway into a world that existed before written history, before cities, before the countless inventions that now shape daily life. You stand at the entrance and look inside. The stone walls are quiet. The fire is gone, the voices have faded. The sleeping spaces where people once rested have disappeared. Yet you can still imagine everything that happened here. A family gathering close together, a child falling asleep beside a trusted adult, a person watching the fire through the darkest hours, a group listening carefully as wolves moved across the landscape outside. The cave feels empty, but it does not feel lifeless. It carries echoes. A major conclusion, supported by the study of human evolution, is that our ability to cooperate, communicate, and adapt has been central to human survival for hundreds of thousands of years. Humans succeeded not because they were the strongest creatures in ancient environments, but because they could work together, share knowledge, and respond creatively to challenges. This cave represents all of those abilities. The fire represents creativity. The sleeping group represents cooperation. The shelter represents adaptation. The memories represent communication. Everything you experience during this night connects to the larger human story. You think about the wolves one final time. They began the night as a symbol of uncertainty, a reminder of the wild world beyond the firelight. But now they represent something different. They represent connection. Humans and wolves shared landscapes for countless generations. Their paths crossed again and again. Those encounters shaped one of the most remarkable relationships in history. A wild animal and a human species slowly learning about each other. A relationship that would eventually change both. But before that transformation happened, there were nights like this. Nights when humans and wolves simply existed near one another. Two different lives moving through the same ancient world. You imagine the final moments before sunrise on that prehistoric night. The fire was nearly finished. The people were tired. The wolves had moved away. The first light appeared slowly over the landscape. Nobody celebrated. Nobody recorded the moment. Nobody knew they had achieved something extraordinary. They had simply survived another night. And that was enough. A fascinating point from archaeological interpretation is that many of the most important moments in human history were probably ordinary moments that repeated countless times. The discovery of shelter, the maintenance of fire, the sharing of food, and the teaching of knowledge may seem simple. But these repeated actions allowed human communities to continue across generations. History is often built from quiet moments. A person preparing a sleeping place, a person checking the fire, a person comforting a child, a person teaching someone younger. These actions rarely become famous, but they create the foundation of everything that follows. You look around the cave and imagine all the invisible stories that once existed here. Someone may have laughed here. Someone may have felt afraid here. Someone may have remembered a loved one here. Someone may have dreamed of a future they would never see. Their individual stories are lost, but their existence shaped the world that came after them. Researchers still explore many questions about prehistoric life, including how early humans understood their environments, how they organized their communities, and how much emotional meaning they attached to places such as caves. Different interpretations continue because the past leaves behind fragments rather than complete answers. Perhaps that is why prehistoric history feels so fascinating. It invites imagination while reminding us to remain careful. We can discover clues, we can create explanations, we can build stories, but we must also respect the mystery. The people who slept in these caves were real. They experienced real cold, real darkness, real uncertainty, real comfort. They were not characters from a distant fantasy world. They were humans, like you. You step away from the cave entrance and look across the landscape one last time. The sun is higher now. The world is bright. Animals move through their routines. The wind continues. The seasons continue. Life continues. The prehistoric night has ended. But its lesson remains. Humans have always searched for places where they can feel safe. Sometimes those places are modern homes. Sometimes they are small shelters beneath stone. Sometimes they are simply the presence of other people nearby. The details change, the need remains. You think about the quiet moment when you first entered the cave. At that time, the darkness felt unfamiliar. The wolves sounded threatening. The environment felt overwhelming. But after spending the night there, you discovered something different. The darkness contained beauty. The wilderness contained patterns. The unknown could become familiar. The ancient world was not only a place of danger, it was also a place of wonder, a place where humans looked at the stars, a place where people created warmth, a place where communities formed, a place where stories began, and perhaps that is the most important memory to carry from this journey. Not the fear of wolves, not the cold stone, not the difficulty of survival. Instead, remember the small circle of firelight. Remember the people gathered together. Remember the quiet strength of ordinary humans facing another night. The cave slowly disappears behind you as you continue forward. But the feeling remains. The same sky that watched over prehistoric sleepers watches over you now. The same stars that appeared above ancient landscapes still shine. The same human desire for peace, safety, and rest continues. Tonight, you travelled backward through thousands of years. You listened to the wind. You heard the wolves. You felt the warmth of the fire. You rested beside people who lived before history was written. And now the journey comes to an end. The ancient cave grows quiet. The flames become a memory. The footsteps fade. The wilderness settles. Everything becomes still. You are safe. You are warm. You can let the ancient night drift away. The cave is quiet now. The fires become a distant memory, a soft glow carried away by time. The voices that once filled the stone walls have faded into the endless story of the earth. The wolves have moved beyond the valley. The night has passed, and the ancient landscape rests beneath the gentle light of morning. You no longer need to listen for footsteps outside. You no longer need to wonder if the fire will last. You no longer need to hold your attention between sleep and awareness. The long night is finished. Imagine yourself returning once more to that warm place beside the fire. Feel the smooth rhythm of breathing around you. Hear the quiet movement of the ancient world settling into peace. The stone walls remain steady. The ground beneath you feels familiar. The darkness that once seemed uncertain has become a place of comfort. Thousands of years separate you from those who slept there, yet the feeling remains close, a place to rest, a place to belong, a place where the world becomes quieter. The ancient cave slowly fades into the distance, but its lesson stays with you. Human beings have always searched for warmth, safety, and connection. From fires beneath stone ceilings to the homes of today, the desire for a peaceful night has always been part of the human journey. So allow yourself to rest now. Let the sounds of the ancient wilderness become softer. Let the wind become a gentle whisper. Let the fire become a small point of warmth in your imagination. The wolves are far away. The morning has arrived. The cave is safe, and you can finally close your eyes, relax, and drift into a peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams.